What's up, guys? This is Chris from DraftDashboard.com.
Here are my DFS picks for NFL Week 13 sleeper picks.
These picks apply for DraftKings and FanDuel. Before I get started, please drop a like on this video and hit that red subscribe button
And hit that bell icon.
so you don't miss our new videos.
In this video, I'm going to give you some of my top DFS sleeper picks, super low priced and low ownership players that could crush value this week and give your lineup an advantage over the field. These are risky plays, meant for large tournaments only. Don't go all in on any of these guys. They are high risk, high reward picks. And if you stick around to the very end of this video, we'll use the Draft Dashboard tools to make a DFS lineup using the picks we just made. Okay guys, NFL Week 13, let's take a look at the quarterback position. One of my sleeper picks at the quarterback position is Baker Mayfield from the Cleveland Browns playing the Tennessee Titans, who have the 10th worst defense overall, and they give up the 4th most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. Baker Mayfield, he's only averaged 13.8 fantasy points per game on the season. He gets an average of 3 rush attempts per game, but he scored 18 fantasy points last week. He's got some upside, and he's only going to be about 2% owned, projected at 16.9 fantasy points here in Week 13. He's 5,300 DraftKings salary and 1,800 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 53 points scored in this game, with the Browns trailing by 5. So you got a great matchup, a high-scoring game, and a passing game script. So I like Baker Mayfield here versus the Tennessee Titans. Another sleeper pick at the quarterback position is Mike Glennon from the Jacksonville Jaguars playing the Minnesota Vikings, who have the 7th worst defense overall and they're middle of the pack defending opposing quarterbacks. Mike Glennon scored 18 fantasy points as the starting quarterback last week. He got 2 rush attempts. He's only going to be about 1% owned, projected at 14.4 fantasy points here in Week 13, but he's only 4,800 DraftKings salary and 2,000 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 50.5 points scored in this game, and the Jacksonville Jaguars trailing by 10. So he's got a pretty good matchup here in a high-scoring game, in a passing game script, and his salary is just really low, so that's going to allow you to open up your lineup at the other positions. Super low ownership, so I like Mike Glennon here versus the Minnesota Vikings. Okay, let's take a look at the running back position. One of my sleeper picks at the running back position is Kareem Hunt from the Cleveland Browns playing the Tennessee Titans, who have the 10th worst defense overall, and they give up the 6th most fantasy points to opposing running backs. Kareem Hunt has averaged 14.4 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 14.3 rush attempts per game and 2.9 pass targets per game. Now, he hasn't played very well the past couple of weeks, only scoring 6 and 9 fantasy points, but he was consistently putting up 15 plus fantasy points in the games before that, and he's only going to be about 5% owned, projected at 12.5 fantasy points here in Week 13, and he's only 5,400 DraftKings salary and 900 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 53 points scored in this game, with the Browns trailing by 5. He's got a great matchup, so I like Kareem Hunt here versus the Tennessee Titans. Okay, now if you're really looking to save some salary at the running back position, take a look at Frank Gore from the New York Jets playing the Las Vegas Raiders, who have the 8th worst defense overall, and they give up the 3rd most fantasy points to opposing running backs. Frank Gore, he scored 12 and 15 fantasy points in the past 2 games off of 18 and 15 rush attempts. He also got 3 and 2 pass targets in those games. He's only going to be about 3% owned, projected at 10.8 fantasy points here in week 13, and he's only 4,400 DraftKings salary and 900 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 47 points scored in this game, with the Jets trailing by 8. So he's got a great matchup here. He's getting pretty good rushing volume over the past couple of weeks. So I like Frank Gore here versus the Las Vegas Raiders. And another sleeper pick at the running back position is David Johnson from the Houston Texans playing the Indianapolis Colts, who have a good defense overall and they're middle of the pack defending opposing running backs. David Johnson has averaged 12 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 12.9 rush attempts per game and 3.1 pass targets per game. He's only going to be about 1% owned, projected at 12 fantasy points here in week 13. He's 5,400 DraftKings salary and 800 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 50.5 points scored in this game, with the Texans trailing by 3.5. So although this isn't a great matchup, remember that Will Fuller is out and David Johnson is back from injury, so he could get a pretty big workload here in week 13. So I like David Johnson here versus the Indianapolis Colts.
Real quick, guys, I got great news. For a limited time, we're offering a full 30-day trial to Draft Dashboard. You can try all the tools for NFL. NBA is right around the corner. This is a great time to get in and try everything for 1 month. The tools are all about saving research time. You can see the last 3 games, the fantasy points per game, the targets they got per game, so you can see how involved they are in the offense, the rushes they got per game. Seeing all this stuff on one screen helps you save time and make better picks. Oh, and if you're tired of doing research every day, we just added a cheat sheet that shows hand-picked plays for the slate. No confusing stat lines, no headaches, just a simple cheat sheet that shows the absolute best players for your lineups.
Okay, let's take a look at the wide receiver position. One of my sleeper picks at the wide receiver position is Sterling Shepard from the New York Giants playing the Seattle Seahawks, who have the second worst defense overall, and they give up the absolute most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. Sterling Shepard has averaged 12.2 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 7.1 pass targets per game. He's only going to be about 2% owned, projected at 12 fantasy points here in week 13. He's 5,300 DraftKings salary and 300 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 47.5 points scored in this game, with the Giants trailing by 10.5. So you've got a fantastic matchup and a passing game script. So I like Sterling Shepard here versus the Seattle Seahawks. Another sleeper pick that I like at the wide receiver position is Henry Ruggs from the Las Vegas Raiders playing the New York Jets, who have the 5th worst defense overall, and they give up the 6th most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. Henry Ruggs, he's only averaged 6.8 fantasy points per game on the season off of 3.4 pass targets per game, but he did score 8 fantasy points last week off of 5 pass targets. He's only going to be about 1% owned, projected at 9.2 fantasy points here in week 13. And he's only 4,500 DraftKings salary and 900 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 47 points scored in this game, with the Raiders favored by 8. So he's got a great matchup here. This guy's a speedster. He could catch one long pass for 70 yards and a touchdown and make up his value. So I like Henry Ruggs here versus the New York Jets. Another sleeper pick at the wide receiver position is Keelan Cole from the Jacksonville Jaguars playing the Minnesota Vikings, who have the 7th worst defense overall, and they give up the 2nd most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. Keelan Cole has averaged 11.1 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 5.5 pass targets per game. He's only going to be about 2% owned, projected at 9.8 fantasy points here in week 13, and he's only 3,800 DraftKings salary and 1,500 more on FanDuel.
Vegas thinks there's going to be 50.5 points scored in this game, with the Jaguars trailing by 10. So great matchup, high scoring game, passing game script, low price tag, low ownership. So I like Keelan Cole here versus the Minnesota Vikings. Okay, moving on to the tight end position. So ownership wise, this guy's not really a sleeper pick, but this name might surprise you. I like Anthony Firkser from the Tennessee Titans playing the Cleveland Browns, who have a middle of the pack defense overall, and they give up the 4th most fantasy points to opposing tight ends. Anthony Firkser, he's averaged 6 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 3.6 pass targets per game, but he's going to get the opportunity because of Jonnu Smith being out with injury, so he should get more pass targets this game, and he can put up some pretty big numbers when he gets the opportunity. So he's going to be about 20% owned, projected at 8.5 fantasy points here in week 13, because he's only $2,500 DraftKings salary and $2,100 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 53 points scored in this game, with the Titans favored by 5. He's got a great matchup here, and that price tag allows you to do a lot with your lineup at the other positions. So he's going to be one of these minimum salary players that's going to allow you to play a guy like Dalvin Cook, Devontae Adams, Derrick Henry. These minimum salary players open up your salary at the other positions. So I like Anthony Firkser here versus the Cleveland Browns. Another sleeper pick that I like at the tight end position is Hayden Hurst from the Atlanta Falcons playing the New Orleans Saints, who have a good defense overall, but they're middle of the pack defending opposing tight ends. Hayden Hurst has averaged 9.5 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 5.8 pass targets per game. He's only going to be about 1% owned, projected at 9.4 fantasy points here in week 13. He's $4,000 DraftKings salary and $1,600 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 46 points scored in this game, with the Falcons trailing by 3. So I like Hayden Hurst here versus the New Orleans Saints. And another sleeper pick at the tight end position is Jimmy Graham from the Chicago Bears playing the Detroit Lions, who have the 3rd worst defense overall. And although they've been pretty good versus opposing tight ends, Jimmy Graham has averaged 9.2 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 5.6 pass targets per game. He's only going to be about 1% owned, projected at 7.6 fantasy points here in week 13. He's $3,600 DraftKings salary and $1,800 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 44.5 points scored in this game, with the Bears favored by 3. So with Allen Robinson questionable, he was banged up a little bit this week. Jimmy Graham could get more opportunity in this game, so I like Jimmy Graham here versus the Detroit Lions. And another sleeper pick at the tight end position. I don't know how much of this guy I'm going to play, but I just wanted to mention him because he is back from injury here in week 13. It's Zach Ertz from the Philadelphia Eagles playing the Green Bay Packers, who have a middle of the pack defense overall. And although they've been pretty good versus opposing tight ends, Zach Ertz has averaged 8.3 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 7.5 pass targets per game. He's only going to be about 1% owned, projected at 8 fantasy points here in week 13. He's $3,900 DraftKings salary and $1,800 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 49.5 points scored in this game, with the Eagles trailing by 8. So Carson Wentz and the Eagles have been awful the past few weeks, but you never know what you're going to get with Zach Ertz back from injury. His salary's low, super low ownership. This guy has big upside when he's healthy. So as a high risk, high reward play, I like Zach Ertz here versus the Green Bay Packers.
If you want to try all these daily fantasy tools for yourself, click the link in the description below this video or just go to draftdashboard.com.
You can use our DFS lineup optimizer to build quality lineups using our picks and your own custom player pool. Click the link in the description below this video and try all these daily fantasy tools right now. Thanks so much for watching. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit that bell icon so you can get instant updates whenever we post a new video. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please smickety smash that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Oh, and please comment below with your favorite player for this NFL slate. I love to hear what you guys have to think. Thanks again, and good luck.